All right, moving on to the mouth, everybody's favorite. Mouth, we're only talking about digestion during this section, and we're not talking about movement or talking like we did in the muscular system. So your mouth is actually considered part of your digestive system. So it's the first portion, and it functions, it receives food, obviously, that's where you're going to put your food, is in your mouth. And then mastication is the term that deals with mechanical digestion. So mastication is breaking the food into smaller pieces. My husband, for example, is terrible at this. He's always in a hurry, he eats really fast, and I bet half the time when he's eating he not chokes, but he swallows his food in too big of pieces quite often. So mastication, you need to break that food particles down before you actually swallow. So oral cavity is the opening. The cavity is an opening between the palate in your mouth and the tongue. And then the narrow space in between your teeth and cheeks and lips is called the vestibule. So that's, when you puff out your cheeks, you're filling up your vestibule. The oral cavity is actually when you look into the opening of your mouth. Cheeks form the lateral walls of the mouth. Hopefully I'm not teaching you anything new there. Involved in expression and chewing. So when we did talk about your zygomatic muscle, that is found in your cheek area, and it helps very much with chewing. Lips, when it comes to digestion, not a real high function. They surround the mouth, they keep the mouth closed, but other than that, your lips don't really aid other than grabbing food, possibly. They are sensitive to help judge temperature and texture. Even there, if you burn your mouth, typically it's not your lips that you're going to burn, it's going to be your tongue or the inside of your mouth. So tongue is very important. Thick, muscular organ. We raise beef cattle, so every time we butcher, we actually get the tongue. Not that I cook it, and not that we eat it. But the tongue, and even your tongue, the muscle goes back further, so it's a lot longer than you think it is. It's very muscular, and it's very important in digestion. It is covered with mucus. It's going to help food slide better. It has your taste buds, which gives you the ability to have different taste sensations. The papillae are just the little bumps, basically, that hold those taste buds. And then it's attached to the floor of the mouth by the lingual frenulum, which is the little, if you lift up your tongue, there's a little flap, a little hook part at the bottom, and that is the lingual frenulum. Sometimes this can be too big. Speech, sometimes this can actually affect your speech also. Papillae, the little bumps, also provide friction for moving food around. And then the lingual tonsils are towards the back, and basically they are just lymphatic tissue that's located at the root of the tongue. And we will look at the diagram here so you can see. So this lingual frenulum is this little thin piece that sits underneath your tongue. So if you lift your tongue, you can definitely feel that underneath. When it comes to tonsils, your palatine tonsils are going to be back here. A lot of people, especially younger children, think that this hanging down part is your tonsils. That is not your tonsils. That is called your uvula. So if you open your mouth and you look inside somebody's mouth, that part that hangs down is the uvula. And then you have your soft palate is further back and your hard palate is further forward. And if you actually take your tongue and rub it from front to back, you can actually feel the hard actually become softer as you move your tongue backwards. Oh, one more thing. Vestibule, so there's the open space in between your lips and cheeks, so that would be the opening around there. And then your oral cavity is the space that's actually in your mouth. Palate. The palate forms the roof, so the whole roof of your mouth is called the palate. The anterior front is the hard palate. Posterior, the back, is the soft palate. The soft palate and the uvula, that part that hangs down, function to help keep food from coming up your nose. If you have ever, and usually I see this in little kids, you know, they're eating or they're drinking milk. Milk is probably what I've seen the most. And they start laughing or something and they actually have like milk come up their nose. Or sometimes, and this is really gross, but if you're sick and you're vomiting and that kind of comes up into your nose because of the force, and that's very gross, but what happens is there's so much force that the uvula can't stop it. Associated with the palate is those palatine tonsils that I pointed out. Because they're lymphatic, lymphatic helps with infections and protections. That is one of the areas that a doctor will look at. If they are red, you probably have some type of infection. Also, you have pharyngeal tonsils, also called adenoids, and you can also have your adenoids removed. They are located further back, basically above the border of the soft palate and almost back to your pharynx. So here, if I look, here you can see the tongue. When you look at a diagram like this, your tongue looks a lot bigger than you really think that it is, and that's kind of what I was trying to discuss. So your hard palate, the reason it's hard is because there's bone that sits right above it. Your softer palate, there's not so much bone. Uvula, here's what it looks like from the side. There's your palatine tonsils. Pharyngeal tonsil sits way up here, so I will point that out on the diagram. And that's probably about all that I'll point out. But you can kind of see then how, and you talk about how all of your cavities or sinuses in your head kind of lead together. So my mouth leads to the cavity that comes down here. There's also the opening up here that's going to go to my nasal cavity. And then here's the opening to your auditory tube that actually leads to your ears. So you can kind of see how that works. Teeth, you have two sets of teeth. They develop in sockets. Alveolar process is the part of the maxillary and mandibular bones where your teeth actually protrude from. You should have 20 primary teeth, and those are the ones, primary means first, so those are the ones that you lose as a little kid. And I say should because not everybody has that. My son is actually missing some secondary teeth, and he's only in 5th grade. We've seen it through x-rays, but that happens. So sometimes braces have become, I would bet that 90% of the students that I teach have probably had braces at some point in time. Maybe not quite that high. But 20 primary, you should know that, 20 baby teeth, and then 32 secondary teeth. And obviously the function of your teeth is chewing, grinding, breaking large particles into smaller pieces, and that's called mechanical. Mechanical digestion just means breaking into smaller pieces. Different teeth have different functions. Incisors, cuspids, bicuspids, and molars. Your molars are towards the back. They're going to be more for gripping and tearing. Here's a diagram so you can see. Incisors would be your 4 front teeth. And then you have canine teeth. And this is the tooth or the teeth on a dog. This is why they're called canines, that are longer, that protrude down. And then you have premolars, which are also called bicuspids. And then your molars are your back part of your teeth. And here you can actually see the numbers, so you can see where they all come from. Also shows the function. So incisors towards the front, biting, think of biting into an apple, very much use your incisors. Canines, you know, if you're eating something that's tough, a lot of times you'll move it over to the side. And then your molars are more for grinding and breaking into smaller pieces. Every tooth consists of a crown on the top and a root more on the bottom. Enamel, there's tons of advertisements anymore about wear on enamel. Dentin, pulp, cementum, nerves, blood vessels, all of those run through the root canals. We'll look at a diagram that will show this better. The tooth is held in its socket by a periodontal ligament, and that's what, when you actually lose your teeth, that ligament basically decays and corrodes, and then your tooth can actually fall out. So the crown of your tooth is the whole entire top part. The enamel is the white part of your tooth that's on the outside. And that is, I drink Diet Coke. Diet Coke is not good for enamel. Coffee's not. Fruits, too much fruit. Everything wears on your enamel, and it typically does not regenerate. Dentin then would be the layer that's right inside. Notice enamel's only at the top. Dentin goes further down for protection. There's a little layer of cementum then that basically holds underneath. The pulp part of your tooth, if you've ever cracked a tooth and it actually hurt, you've actually got to the pulp because that's where the nerves would actually be at. A lot of times I have a little bitty chip on the outside of my tooth. Doesn't hurt because basically the outer part of your tooth is dead. If someone took a wrench and yanked a tooth out, that would extremely hurt because then you are getting into the nerve tissue that's inside of your tooth. So the root canal is that area that contains the nerves, the blood vessels, and things like that. And then the root, the entire root, is the whole part that sits on the bottom. And that's where we'll stop with our teeth.